like to welcome you to our CBE seminar on Buddhist holidays, or rather, American Buddhist holidays. My name is Jerry Hirano, and I'm the director for the Center for Buddhist Education. These explanations I'm going to go through today are basically how my family and temple, which have been second, third, and fourth generation Japanese American Buddhists, have thought about and celebrated the holidays here in America. I personally love any reason to get together with family, friends, and my sanghas. My temples usually have at least one holiday a month where we can all get together to chant and eat. As I have said to various groups I've spoken to when they ask me, "What's your practice?" I usually reply, "We chant and eat," in reference to these holidays. Every opportunity we get, it seems we have a potluck lunch after or before service. However, for today's presentation, I'll touch on a variety of holidays that I celebrate, not just the ones at my temple. And although we have viewers from Europe, Japan, and other countries, and there might be some differences, I'll try to explain how I celebrate these holidays. Someday, I hope we will have Buddhist holidays in the United States, which are listed on this particular site. You can see on this list of federal holidays, there are no Buddhist holidays. We also don't have any Muslim or Jewish holidays. However, before we can expect the federal government to accept any Buddhist holidays, I think it's important that we Buddhists living in a Western country such as the US, Canada, and Europe need to have a better understanding of our Buddhist holidays and why and how we commemorate and celebrate them. I've always thought that it's important to try to accept the customs and traditions around me. And in this current political climate of creating otherness of those that differ from me by race, color, and religion, I don't want to separate myself from the largely white Christian society I live in. One of the holidays that I didn't list on this, or you don't see on this federal government list, but I think is a great way to celebrate holidays and tradition in general, is the Jewish holiday, which we recently held from April 5th to April 13th, called Passover, especially the idea of the Passover dinner. This is a holiday that I think has all the hallmarks of why we should celebrate any holiday. A time to remember our traditions, our debt of gratitude to those that have come before us, and to teach future generations about this and how they got here. Passover is a Jewish holiday that celebrates the biblical story of the Israelites' escape from slavery in East Egypt. In Israel, Passover is traditionally celebrated for 7 days and for 8 days among many Jews in the diaspora. The diaspora is the dispersion of the Israelites out of their ancestral homeland and their subsequent settlement in various parts of the world. The Seder, or the dinner, consists of 15 points that are to be followed by specific order, such as blessings, when to drink from your wine, when to wash your hands, even when and how much matzah to be eaten. However, I especially like the 6th point of this dinner, called Manishtana, or the 4 questions. These questions are asked of the elders or the elder at the table by the youngest child present. This is a way for the child to not only remember the traditions of their culture, but it includes the youngest and oldest of guests to participate, which is the same reason I think that it's important for our Dharma school children to attend the services at our temples with parents and grandparents. I used to have my Dharma school kids, when they ask me a question, tell them, first ask your parents. And if your parents don't know, ask your grandparents. And if they don't know, you suggest to them that we should all go to the temple together, and then we can ask Sensei. So I'm sure some people are asking, why are you starting this Buddhist holiday presentation with a Jewish holiday. I do have a reason, and my purpose is that by understanding other religious traditions and their holidays, we can better understand our own. For example, although I'm focusing on the entire year, January to December, we usually refer to the time after Thanksgiving and just before New Year's Day as the holiday season. From my perspective, I try to consider my holiday season as Thanksgiving to Honko in January. This includes celebrating Christmas and Thanksgiving, and I could even stretch it a bit to put in Halloween. The holiday season is a time for aspiring for goodwill to all, peace on earth, with a heart of generosity and giving. Wouldn't it be great if we could do this throughout the year? However, if you're like me, feelings like these of gratitude and selfless giving, it's very difficult to keep all year round. So I believe holidays are special opportunities for each of us to remember these things, such as they do in the Passover Seder. The word holiday comes from the Old English holidag, meaning holy day. My online dictionary has described it first as a noun, a day fixed by law or custom on which ordinary business is suspended in commemoration of some event or honor of some person. Any day of exemption from work. 3, a time or period of exemption from any requirement, duty, assessment, etc. As an adjective, it means of or relating to a festival, festive and joyous, such as a holiday mood, or suitable for attire, such as holiday attire. I think it's interesting that the Japanese word for or equivalent to the English holiday is either holiday or yasumi. Many people mistakenly think of the Japanese word matsuri to mean holiday, and it's sometimes used interchangeably. For example, many of the happy coats that you see people wearing during Obon dance season often have the Japanese character for matsuri on the back. However, the word matsuri is traditionally in reference to Shinto rites and rituals. The etymology of the word means enshrined, such as it refers to comfort, prayer, to show gratitude for the rituals of nature. Very Shinto in the way this word is used. As a result, most matsuri or festival days in Japan vary from area to area and are often specific to certain areas and not on a set day. There are a few exceptions to this within our Jodo Shinshu Hongan Jiha tradition, such as Buddha's birthday is also called Hanamatsuri. In South Asia and Southeast Asia, as well as Tibet and Mongolia, the most important Buddhist holiday is called Vesak. This is held on the full moon day of the Vaishaka month. The Vesak day marks the birth, enlightenment, and death of Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni. And although Buddhist holidays have been held for hundreds of years, it wasn't until 1950 when the first conference of the World Fellowship of Buddhists established a resolution that states that this conference of the World Fellowship of Buddhists, while recording its appreciation of the gracious act of His Majesty, the Maharaja of Nepal, in making the full moon day of Vesak a public holiday, earnestly requests the heads of governments of all countries in which large or small number of Buddhists are to be found to take steps to make the full moon day in the month of May a public holiday in honor of the Buddha, who is universally acclaimed as one of the greatest benefactors of humanity. However, our Jodo Shinshu Hongan Jiha tradition does not celebrate Vesak as this. The two most important holidays for Jodo Shinshu Buddhists are Honko, Shindan's memorial service, in Gotang, Shindan's birthday. In our Buddhist churches of America, we celebrate many Buddhist holidays, not particularly significant for our tradition. For example, in our Buddhist churches of America, there are holidays that no other sects of Buddhism celebrate. And we're quite specific to BC, such as Socho no Ki, which is Bishop's Memorial Day, a day when we gather to express gratitude for the contributions made by our BCA bishops. It's usually held sometime in the summer. I don't even know the day. The reason is probably that you've never heard of it was because many of our temples don't have services in the summer on Sundays. This has become most of our temples. I'd say most BCA temples were founded by farmers, and farmers had to work extremely hard during summer months with the entire family working, so there are no services. And then on September 1st, we have Beikoku Bukkyo Kaikyo Kinenbi, our BCA founding day. This commemorates when Nishihon Ganji sent Reverend Shuei Sonoda and Reverend Kakuryo Nishijima to the US, and they arrived here on September 1st, 1899. However, for today's presentation, I'd like to go through the calendar from January to December. And if your temple is like mine, there is usually a holiday almost every month. It's on these days when many temples also hold their Shotsuki Hoyo services. Shotsuki Hoyo is a service that commemorates the death anniversaries of the members of that temple's Sangha. In Japan, these death days are known as Gomeinichi. In Japan, Gomeinichi is usually the day that a priest will visit a family's home and conduct a short memorial service. Many of our Buddhist holidays are death days, so that the idea of Gomeinichi, I think, are for two reasons. One is that when I first went to Japan as a student almost 40 years ago, this idea of Gomeinichi, of the priest going to the temple to each home during the month, was very different than our own BCA temples. And then it's from this act of going from house to house that most of the income comes to the temple, whereas our BCA temples usually come through various donations that are meant throughout the year and for special occasions. The kanji for Gomeinichi is also, I think, important, for it literally means honorable, go, life, inochi, mei, and then nichi, day. I think this relates to the Buddhist ideal that to really live, we must accept the reality of death in our own lives. And we did not get to where we are on our own. It took many causes and conditions to get here. So I think the use of these three kanji shows the Buddhist influence on Japanese culture. This juxtaposition of the name of the day of death anniversary actually meaning day of life. So let's get to the calendar. From January 1st is Shisho-e, New Year's Day. This is the first service of the year. It's often held so that we can begin the new year with the proper mindset, a mind of gratitude and appreciation for all that we have. For most Japanese and Japanese American families, January 1st is a pretty big celebration, but it's not really because of Shisho-e. It's because of Oshogatsu, the New Year, which is the biggest holiday in Japan. January 1st is celebrated as the New Year, and many Japanese go either to the local jinja, the Shinto shrine, or to the temple for what's called Hatsumode, literally meaning the first visit. In Japan, as the biggest holiday of the year, there's so many traditions and special holiday foods for this day. However, there's no special rules or order for the meals. as there are for the Passover Seder. In fact, I dare say most people have no idea why they eat or do what they do on New Year's Day. But I'd like to mention two of those traditions that they have on Oshogatsu. Number one, for most holidays, and especially New Year's Day, food is important. And Oshogatsu is really food-oriented. The first food you're supposed to eat is ozoni. Ozoni is actually my favorite New Year food. It's a type of mochi, rice cake soup, that varies by various areas in Japan. For example, Western Japan uses miso as a soup, and Eastern Japan usually uses more of a clear soup base. There are a variety of New Year's foods besides ozoni. Almost 40 years ago, when Reverend David Matsumoto and I went to Japan, and we were living at the dormitory of Honganji, the international staff told us when New Year's came around that you better stock up on food because everything is closed for the 3 days of New Year's, because you're not supposed to cook during these 3 days. You're supposed to visit family and friends to get to know each other. That's why everything is usually either boiled or things that will keep, like nimono, which is usually boiled in soy sauce, sugar, and mirin. And although food is very important for this holiday, one of the things that people really relate to is the Chinese or Japanese zodiac. For example, this year is called the Year of the Rabbit. The various animal signs are rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. And each of these are also put together with elemental symbols such as wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. There's a story about how these animals came to be in the zodiac, but it's a little too long for this presentation. However, things like the zodiac and what this has to say about who and what you are, these superstitions aren't Jodo Shinshu at all. Jodo Shinshu really discourages use of superstitions. So a good example of this is if you were to go to almost any large temple or shrine in Japan, there are little vendors, or even the temple themselves sell these things called omamori, or talismans, either for good luck, for good schoolwork, for health, safety, to keep you out of car accidents, etc. However, if you went to Honganji, Nishi, or Higashi, you will never find any of these omamori to purchase there. As I said earlier, the most important holiday for Jodo Shinshu Buddhists is Goshoki Honko, or Shindan's annual death anniversary. Honko literally means to repay the debt of gratitude. The date of Honko depends upon whether the old Japanese lunar calendar or the Western Gregorian calendar is used. Higashi Honganji temples and some Nishi Honganji temples, such as Berkeley, commemorate it around November 28th using the lunar calendar. However, the Gregorian calendar was introduced to Japan in 1873, the Western calendar, as part of the Meiji Restoration, which began in 1867 and ended with the Emperor Meiji's death in 1912. And the Nishi Honganji tradition of holidays follows this calendar. Thus, Honko is held between January 9th and 16th. As a child growing up in the temple, I couldn't really understand what the big deal was about Honko. There wasn't anything special to me, except that we chanted Shoshinge, which took a long time. And it was, to be honest, pretty boring. And I also know that my Caucasian friends who went to the Mormon churches had no holiday like Honko. So I decided that I didn't want my kids or the Dharma school kids to have this type of feeling. So I've written a lot of stories. So I created a story called Horus the Honko Hippo. And I've also wrote stories about various animals in the Pure Land, such as Orlando the Obon Gaki or ostrich, Eve the Buddhist bunny, who talks about the Trikaya, the three baskets, Harry the Hanamatsuri groundhog, and Fox the Ohigan phoenix. So if you want to hear those stories, you can look at my temple's newsletters where I've had a lot of them. Then we come to February. I want to mention just one interesting tradition about Valentine's Day, which is February 14th. But in Japan, there are also two holidays that we don't celebrate here in the United States. One is National Foundation Day, Kenkoku Kinen no Hi, which is February 11th. And then right now with the current emperor, February 23rd is his birthday, since Emperor Naruhito was born on February 23rd, 1960. The February 14th, Valentine's Day, is actually a holiday that began as a Catholic feast day in honor of Saint Valentine's, a 3rd century Roman saint said to have been martyred on February 14th. Saint Valentine was said to have fallen in love with the daughter of his jailer. And while he was in prison, he had also miraculously cured this girl of blindness. A miracle is required for sainthood in the Catholic Church. And on the day of his execution, he left a note for this girl and signed it from your Valentine. And this is the basis for, here even in the US, we send Valentine's card and say, from your Valentine. And most cynics, such as myself, think of Valentine's more as a commercial holiday than anything else, where we have to buy expensive presents. But the Japanese take this to an extreme. In Japan, there's a very small Catholic population, so you know that it wasn't a religious holiday. But in 1953, the Kobe-based candy company Morozov began selling heart-shaped chocolates. However, the tradition of the giving of chocolates was somehow switched from how in the US it's usually the male that gives the chocolates to the female. In Japan, February 14th, Valentine's Day, began for women to give the men in their lives chocolate. And there are certain types of chocolate they're supposed to give. There's a thing called homemade choco, which means true fillings. These chocolates you give to special men, such as your husbands or boyfriends, who you have true fillings for. Then there's giri choco, which is obligation chocolates, which are given to fellow workers or various men in their lives they don't have very strong feelings for. And then there's a thing called homo choco, which means friend chocolates. And these are given to the guys in these women's life who are in the friend zone and they don't have any intention of becoming closer. And they're also given to their women's friends. And so because it was women giving chocolates to the men in 1970, another candy company, Ishimura Manseido, established March 14th to be called White Day. And on White Day, men were supposed to return a gift to the women that have given them chocolates. And there's also the custom called Sambai Gaeshi, or meaning returning 3 times better than what you've gotten. So it's genius for these companies to make these traditions as part of the culture. I read someplace that during this Valentine White Day period, most Japanese candy companies earn 50% of their profits. For myself, I'm lucky that my wife is Filipino, so she never gives me chocolates on Valentine's Day, so I don't have to worry about this Sambay Gaeshi or White Day. The other day that most of our temples do celebrate in February is Nirvana Day. At least my temples in Salt Lake, Ogden, Honeyville, and Idaho Oregon Buddhist Temple, we commemorate the death of Shakyamuni Buddha on February 15th. This is one of the holidays which Buddhists who celebrate Vesak include in their Vesak celebration. However, we Mahayana Buddhists usually consider February 15th as the day of his death. It was said that Shakyamuni Buddha chose the time and place of his death. A Buddha can do that. So he was 80 at the time he died, and people were beginning to question his humanity. And during that time, the lifespan was probably 40, maybe even less. So the Buddha was twice as old. So they're saying, he's not even human. So this would discount or almost eliminate any value or validity to his teachings. So his death was a way for the Buddha to teach his disciples and all the people that death is a part of life, as I talked about with Gomeinichi. At my temples, we also have what we call pet memorial services, because for many of us, the first time we experience death is when a pet dies. And so, like this year, just a few weeks ago, my pet Miso, we had to put to sleep. And we have 3 dogs. We have Koge, Musubi, which these pictures are of. As you can see, Koge is a pretty big dog. He's 160 pounds. And his sister, Musubi, we call Subi, is about 90 pounds. They're big dogs, but the boss was definitely our little dog who weighed about 6 pounds, Miso. So I was personally quite shocked how Miso's death affected me. You know, when my mother died 30-something years ago, it really hurt. I was traumatized by her death. But since that time, I've had many friends, family members, even my dad die. And I've probably performed hundreds of funerals. So in some ways, I thought, well, I'm kind of becoming insensitive or numb about death. Didn't really affect me. But when Miso died, it was like, to be honest, worse than when my dad died. It's like a child died. I don't think it's as serious as a child or a spouse dying, but it really did affect me. So I held a funeral for Miso. And I have Miso's ashes actually sitting right in front of me in my Butsudan right now, because through Miso, I remembered how important this concept of all beings having a finite amount of time. So at our temple, we have pet memorial service on Nirvana Day, February 15th. Then we go into March. March is springtime, so I really think that maybe there's not too many holidays in March. So Ohigan is the main holiday for us as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists. And Ohigan is also called Sambutsu E in our Jodo Shinshu tradition. Ohigan is kind of a strange word because it's the Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese translation of the Sanskrit term for other shore, which is paramita. Paramita are Dana, Sila, Chanti, Vidya, Dhyana, and Prajna. These are practices to get from this shore to the other shore, which is enlightenment. And so a traditional part of many Dharma talks during Ohigan, whether it's fall or spring, it's done twice a year on the equinox because days aren't too hot, the days aren't too cold, they're not too long, not too short. But anyway, the story that's always told is called Niga Byakudo, the story of the two rivers and the white path. This is a story from Zendo, which is one of the seven patriarchs. But Shindan also wrote the same parable in his Kyogyo Shinsho. So hopefully, if you have questions on this, you will ask your sensei or the minister what this Niga Byakudo is if you don't know. So now the next holiday is, well, probably a lot of people say it's probably one of the biggest holidays for us Buddhists, Hanamatsuri. Hanamatsuri is held on April 8th. And for, as I said, certain Southeast Asian Buddhists, this is also a part of Vesak. When I was small, if I were asked what's the most important Buddhist holiday, I would probably say Hanamatsuri, because it wasn't just the service where we have the Hanamido, like you can see in this picture, where we take a spoonful or a little dipper of sweet tea and pour it over the image of baby Buddha pointing to the sky. But most temples have some type of program from their Dharma school. When I was small, there was no Japanese theater, so Hanamatsuri was also when they would show Japanese movies at the temple, usually one modern and one samurai movie. And so this was a time when they gave us snacks. And like I said, food is very important, and I relate many of the holidays that we have to the foods that I get to eat during that time. So for Hanamatsuri, for some reason, they always gave us little bags that had a Twinkie and a banana in it. So my temples in at least Ogden and Salt Lake, whenever we have Hanamatsuri and the potluck, they always put out Twinkies and bananas. So Hanamatsuri is a very important holiday for most temples because grandparents, parents come to watch their children in these various programs. I don't think it happens as much now, but when I was a child, even the parents and the grandparents would get up and perform various things like singing shigin or doing Japanese odori. So it was quite a celebration. I'm not sure what the relationship is between Twinkies and bananas. Maybe they were fairly cheap for what you get. Just today, when I was having lunch with my nephew, he said his memory was that he got Kentucky Fried Chicken for the lunch on Hanamatsuri, because that's what we always did. Also in Salt Lake, everyone got a little Kentucky Fried Chicken box lunch. So anyways, this is Hanamatsuri. I think that Hanamatsuri has changed now, and we don't know how it's going to change in the future. So I just included this picture. This particular Lego Hanamido was sent to me from Tara Tamaribuchi, who's a member of the Seattle Betsuin. And as you can tell, it's an animal. Usually the Hanamido is often put on a white elephant because of the dream that the Buddha's mother had of a white elephant entering her side. But this particular Hanamido has a blurb, which is an animal in the Star Wars universe. So maybe in the future, we'll have some other type of things to go along with this Mandalorian Hanamido. So now we get into May, which is the month we're in right now. And the one holiday in May that we celebrate, it's a Buddhist holiday, is Gotang-e, which is Shindan Shonin's birthday. In fact, right now, I don't know if it's today or tomorrow, but I think throughout the year even, we're celebrating Shinran Shonin's 850th birthday. He was born in Kyoto, Japan, and at the time of his birth, he wasn't named Shinran. His name was Matsu Wakamaro. So you've probably heard of many people going to Japan right now for special services, because after they have the service for Shinran's 850th birthday, they're also going to have a World Buddhist Women's Association conference. So the next holiday really isn't anything in June. Some temples might have a graduation service or whatever, but that's about the time when most Dharma schools stop having services. But in July, we have a service that I think is probably the biggest for most temples, at least as far as fundraising. And this is Obon, or Kangie, gathering of joy. Obon, the origins of Obon come from the Ulumbana Sutra, which is a sutra that talks about one of the Buddha's 10 great disciples. In Japanese, we call him Mokuren Sonja. In Pali, I think I'm not sure how you pronounce it, maybe Magalyayana. I usually say Mokuren since it's easier. But it's about Mokuren finding out each of these 10 great disciples had particular specialties. Mokuren's specialty, why he was one of the great disciples, was his ability to see beyond, his insight. And so after his mother died, he saw that his mother had been reborn into what's called Gakido, or the realm of the hungry ghosts. And these pictures that I have are from a scroll that is at the Kyoto National Museum called the Gaki Scroll. And you could see these pictures of the Gaki. The picture on the right is of Mokuren, or a priest, by his mother. And these Gaki are constantly hungry. They have huge bodies with little skinny necks, and they're not really able to eat anything because it usually bursts into flame. And so when Mokuren saw that his mother was suffering like this, he went to the Buddha for guidance. And he asked the Buddha, what can I do? And I thought the picture on the left was interesting. It's part of this Gaki scroll, but it shows Amida Buddha preaching or saving the Gaki. And this is one element of Buddhism that I think is important, that whenever we talk about hells or realms such as these, whenever they're depicted in scrolls and pictures, there's always a Buddha or a Bodhisattva present, which really means that anyone always have the potential for enlightenment. So anyway, when Mokuren did this gift of dana, feeding his fellow monks, the next time he searched for his mother, he realized that she had been released from Gakido, the realm of the hungry ghosts. And with this insight, he jumped into the air and began to dance with joy. And that's why this is called Gathering of Joy, Kangie. And also it is the beginning of what we call Obon, dancing. However, because of Obon being a time when Mokuren's mother died, it's a time that we have Hatsubon and Obon Hakamairi. So these are just examples. For myself, having 4 temples, I drive through Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, Idaho, Oregon. It's about 1,200 miles, and I do services at over 25 cemeteries. And usually it's just me going from site to site. And as you can see, I would usually have miso with me. So she even did oshoko, as you can see on the left. And in the middle is one of the monuments at the Salt Lake Cemetery. And the inscription says Ku e Isho, which is from the Amida Sutra. And it means together again in one place. And I think this concept is very important for people not to forget, because within our teaching, it does say those who die, we will be reunited with them together in one place. So during this time, this gathering of joy, at least my family comes home. My girls come from California, return to Salt Lake for the Bon Odori. We have the names of the people at my temple who have died during the year for the Hatsubon service. Then we invite people if they want. They buy these little choching and put the name of their loved ones who are no longer here, and we hang them around the Yagura. So it's a big fundraiser also for our temple. Obon, as most of you know, is very popular, and it's changing all over the place. In Japan, there are different types of odori dance in various parts, like I think that bottom left picture is called, I think, Awa Odori, but a certain style of dance. And you can see how the chochings are everyone, BCA, Koichi Mizushima, and Michiko Ienaga host our virtual Obon dance. So who knows, in the future, Obon will change again. As you can see that top left picture, in Japan, they're teaching robots how to even dance. So the Obon season changes from place to place. So as time goes on, hopefully we won't forget the main meaning of Obon. And we will enjoy it, because I hope that holidays in general are very happy times, joyous times for us to meet with family and friends to express appreciation. The next, there's really nothing in August. It's too hot, and it's really in the middle of the farming season, so there isn't much during that time. But in Japan, Obon is actually held throughout different times and goes into August. In fact, many places around August 15th, first, second week of Obon, I would never travel in Japan because everybody is returning to their hometowns, Furusato, to visit the graves of their family. So it's almost impossible to get a seat on the trains. And also during Obon, the priests are extremely busy, because during that a 3-day period what they have as Obon, they visit every member of their Sangha. So I remember when I was a student, just to experience it, I was invited to go for Obon Mairi, it's called, to all these homes. We started around 6 o'clock in the morning. In the temple I went to, we had to go to 800 homes in 3 days. So these temples would hire people just to go from home to home to do these Obon services. So I don't know how it will change in the US, but I know Obon seems to be getting bigger and bigger as the years go on. So who knows where it will go. The next holiday isn't really a holiday for Buddhists, but it's one of my favorite holidays, so I put it in, and this is Halloween. Halloween, as you know, is a Christian holiday. And in Mexico, on November 1st, they have a holiday called Dios de los Muertos. And I would suggest, if you want to have a graphic presentation of kind of what we talk about at Obon, you should watch the Disney show called Coco. And both Halloween and Dios de los Muertos comes from a Celtic holiday called Samain, which is the end of the harvest season and the beginning of what they call the darker half of the year. So as you can see, Halloween is a lot of fun at my temple. We usually have a big parade, and you can see my wife Carmela and I, she loves to dress up. And these are some of our costumes through the years. And we would usually try to dress Miso up with us. So in these pictures, you can see Miso dressed in the top left as Grogu. And in the bottom, Carmela and I were Fiona, and I forgot what the Shrek. And we just had Miso dressed as a unicorn. And there's some of the kids that we had in one of our Halloweens. But I also think that Halloween is a good time for us to talk about the masks that we all wear in everyday lives. And part of our goal as Buddhists is find out who we really are. So this is Halloween, which is, as you know, October 31st here in the US. The next month we have Eitai-kyo. At least my temple, we usually do it on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Eitai-kyo literally means perpetual memorial services. And this comes from the Japanese phrase Eitai-dokyo, which means perpetual chanting of the sutras. And Eitai-kyo was set up to make sure of the continuation of the temple for future generations. So most temples will have what's called a Eitai-kyo fund or Eitai-kyo scroll or list that people will donate to. And these funds are used especially for maybe different things that you need on the altar in the Naijing to ensure the chanting and the performance of rituals. So this is the Eitai-kyo service. I'm not really sure if this is done in only Jodo Shinshu. I don't think it's only Jodo Shinshu, but most Japanese sects of Buddhism have a similar Eitai-kyo service. But within BCA, we have Eitai-kyo service, and we usually hold it in November. Also in November, some temples I know it's done in April, but it's a relatively new service called Eshinni Kakushinni Memorial Service. This is a memorial service for Shindan's wife and Shindan's daughter, Kakushinni. You know, whenever people talk about women in Buddhism, I have to emphasize there would be probably no Jodo Shinshu if it wasn't for Eshinni and Kakushinni. Eshinni, Shindan's wife, she was the one who had the money. It's because she was a landowner in the area which is present-day Niigata, where Shindan was exiled to. But because she had personal money to support them, Shindan was able to and teach. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. And then when he was around 60, he returned back to Kyoto to finish his magnum opus, Kyogyo Shinsho. And at that time, he went to the home of his daughter, Kakushinni, who lived in Kyoto. And then after his death, it was Kakushinni who established a mausoleum that had a picture of Shindan, and people from all over Japan who had learned from Shindan would come to pay the respects at this burial site of Shindan. And this is the beginning of Honganji. And also, for many hundreds of years, in fact, it wasn't until 1920s, there was evidence that Shindan existed. Right? There were some scholars who were even saying that Shinran was nothing more than a myth created by Honganji. And then in 1920, in some of the Honganji archives, they found these letters that Eshini had wrote to her daughter Kakushini. And it's the first physical proof that Shinran existed. So we now have this service, Eshini Kakushini Ko, this memorial service in honor of Shinran's wife and daughter, which I think is extremely important. Even throughout Honganji, we've done seminars on women in Buddhism, but Honganji is really indebted to the role of women to create our temples. On December 8th, we have Bodhi Day. In Jodo Shinshu, we also call it Jodo-e. Jodo is like completion, gathering in commemoration of completion of the path. It's the day the Buddha became enlightened. This is also one of the days that many Buddhists would just put into Vesak, but for us within Jodo Shinshu, we have a separate day, Bodhi Day. And this is on December 8th that we celebrate it. Now I skipped Thanksgiving, and I wanted to put it together with Christmas because these are my personal favorite holidays of the year. As you can see, of Christmas. There's lots of food on things. I also always have held Thanksgiving. Even when we were students in Japan, we had Thanksgiving dinners. This is a side note, but we would create Thanksgiving for whoever might not be able to go home to the US. So we would actually have turkeys. Bishop Hirano would usually roast the turkey in his little toaster oven. Reverend David Matsumoto, I remember he would have to take a train to Kobe because there was a Marie Callender's pie shop in Kobe that sold pumpkin pies. So he would go there. I would go every year to the Daimaru department store to buy ham because I didn't want just a little slice of ham like they have in Japan. I wanted a chunk of ham. So actually the people at the Daimaru ham store always remembered me because it costed me $200 for a little tiny ham that we could use to celebrate. But Christmas and Thanksgiving, although they are, you'd probably say, a Christian holiday, pilgrims were Christians and it was their way of thanking God for their deliverance. Christmas is also a Christian holiday. And people ask me, why can a Buddhist celebrate Christmas? What does that have to do with anything? And I explained that think of the holiday spirit that we talk about. Selfless giving, goodwill to man, peace on earth. These are all very Buddhist concepts. And for much of the year, there's this wall between ourselves and maybe our Christian friends and family in regards to certain holidays and religious celebrations. Why don't we take this as an opportunity to join with them in celebrating Thanksgiving and Christmas? There's some people who go, oh, so you mean you just celebrate Christmas as a secular holiday with Santa Claus, Christmas present, Christmas? I says, no, I celebrate Jesus Christ's birth also. If there was no Jesus Christ, there'd be no United States, especially in my case, being from Salt Lake City, Utah, there would definitely not be a Mormon church. So it's because of Jesus Christ that I even have a place. It's because of Jesus Christ that my family was able to come from Japan to America. So yes, I celebrate his birthday. And the way my family celebrates it is with lots of food. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, I can't think of a more Buddhist holiday. And then the last holiday for us Buddhists is called Joya-e. Last night, most people associate it with ringing the bell, Joya and Okane. In Kyoto, usually all through New Year's Eve, Sha on Shon-in and the giant bell there, where they ring it 108 times. The tradition says that you ring the bell 108 times to be rid of your bonno. My feeling about ringing the bell is I can't get rid of my bonno, my afflictions. But ringing that bell remembers that I have it. And in spite of my bonno, I'm still embraced in Amida's compassion. And then we have Toshikoshi Soba, which is just a literal play on words that the New Year is near, and buckwheat noodles are signify health. And then usually on the altar, we have what's called the kagami mochi or kasane mochi. Kagami mochi means mirror mochi. And when I was little, I used to think, why do they call it mirror mochi? Mochi, you can't see yourself in a mochi, and the shape doesn't look like a mirror. But actually, those two mochis are the form that old Japanese mirrors actually used to look like. And so this is to remind us to reflect upon our imperfect selves. And then on the top of the mochi, they place, it's not an orange, it's not a tangerine, it's called a dai-dai. And this is also a play on words. Dai-dai in the kanji literally is generation to generation. And the fruit, dai-dai, actually goes from orange and as it goes green again. So it is talking about general good health with the mochi. And so at many of my services, this also connects to Christmas, is I like to use this quote I think it's appropriate to end this seminar. And also I usually end the service with this quote from Christmas Carol. Christmas Carol, every year I watch the various movies, usually 3 or 4 versions, and I read the Charles Dickens book. It's really small, of the Christmas Carol. But within the works, it has this quote: I will honor Christmas in my heart and to try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me, and I will not shut out the lessons they teach. So I think this is a great sentiment that we could keep in regards to all holidays, whether Buddhist, Christian. There are times for us to get together to remember the past, present, and future, and express gratitude for the lessons that we have learned. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I know there are a lot of holidays that I might not have covered, but if you're wondering about that and you have a sensei or a minister, temple near you, ask them. All right, so thank you. We'll close with Gasho, please. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me, and I will not shut out the lessons they teach. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you for your support of CBE in our programs, and I hope to see some of you again soon. Thank you.